Alright everyone, welcome back to another video. Last time we left off with the crusade for social justice, talking about the early, well actually, I should say, a little bit of the late 1800s, early 1900s, and kind of the um, social revolutions that are happening. Not war, but, like within society. Societal revolutions. Things like women's suffrage, for instance. But we're now on to the Republican split of 1912. Uh, Liberal Republicans were disappointed by the administration of William Howard Taft. They had looked for a second edition of Roosevelt. For had not Taft been in his cabinet, and hadn't he been warmly supported by Roosevelt for the presidency? But Taft proved to be a conservative in opinion and easygoing by temperament. He appointed conservatives to office and relied on the advice of party regulars in Congress. Moreover, the Republicans had two specific quarrels with Taft. He had signed the Payne-Aldrich tariff, which raised as many duties as it diminished, and he had sided with Secretary of the Interior Ballingers against the ardent conservationists, my bad, conservationist Gifford Pinchot, a friend of Roosevelt's. So they looked for an alternative. Some were inclined to favor Robert La Follette of Wisconsin. Floette, not Follett's, of Wisconsin, a more consistent radical even than Roosevelt. But it became plain that he could not defeat Taft for renomination. They finally persuaded Roosevelt to enter the race. Roosevelt took several primaries, but was defeated by states, which chose delegates in convention. Roosevelt denounced the seating of Taft delegates against those chosen by the Roosevelt faction, and proclaimed an independent candidacy. The new party was called the National Progressive Party, but was popularly nicknamed the Bull Moose Party, from a phrase of Roosevelt, "I feel as strong as a bull moose." In the meantime, the Democrats were having a contest of their own. The preferred candidate, who at one period had a majority, though not the required two-thirds of the delegates, was Champ Clark of Missouri, Speaker of the House of Representatives. The runner-up was Woodrow Wilson, Governor of New Jersey and former president of Princeton University. There was also the unusual crop of favorite sons. The usual crop of favorite sons. Bryan, who had been 3 times the defeated candidate of the Democrats, resolved that if he could not be king, at least he would be kingmaker. When Tammany Hall shifted its support to Champ Clark, Bryan shifted his to Wilson, and eventually Wilson was nominated, with Thomas Marshall of Indiana for vice president. There was now a 3-cornered election, and it was the only occasion in American history when an ex-president, a current president, and a future president all competed. During the campaign, an anti-third term fanatic shot and wounded Roosevelt while he was addressing a group of voters, who nevertheless insisted on continuing his speech. As is often the case, the attempted assassination boomeranged and added to Roosevelt's vote. Nevertheless, Wilson was an easy victory. The Republican split had done for the Democrats what the Democratic split of 1860 had done for the Republicans. Roosevelt and his new party came in second, and Taft carried only Utah and Vermont. Liberalism seemed at high tide. Roosevelt's new nationalism and Wilson's new freedom both championed radical reform, and the socialist candidate, Eugene Debs, increased his popular vote. But the First World War turned attention from domestic to foreign issues, and the decade of the 1920s when it's eminently conservative. Yeah, this election really is an interesting one, and it's one of those that it's really interesting what could have happened. A lot of people blame Roosevelt for the split, and to be fair, there is some concern there. But Roosevelt had to be coaxed into this. He didn't necessarily want to do this, um, and realistically, part of it is on Taft as well. Taft, people didn't like him. He knew people didn't like him. He could have dropped out and given his votes to Roosevelt, but he didn't. Um, it would have been interesting if Roosevelt had won a third term, and realistically, he probably should have been the candidate. Taft, not a bad person by any means. He's, like I said, easygoing. Get along with him. Everyone liked Taft, but it's just he was not what people wanted as president. They wanted Roosevelt. And instead, we get probably one of the worst presidents in American history. But we'll now get on to the pictures. At the top here is a cartoon of Theodore Roosevelt and William Howard Taft entitled Goodness Gracious, I Must Have Been Dozing. Roosevelt watches from outside the window as Mother Taft has trouble with her knitting. The animals causing the trouble are labeled the House, the Senate, the courts, and the Cabinet. Yeah, Taft had quite a few issues, and that obviously that's the joke, is that Roosevelt went away and came back and was like, "What the heck is going on? What, like, why did everything I do just fall apart?" Yeah, kind of unfortunate for Roosevelt there and for the country. At the left is William Howard Taft, the 27th president of the United States. And William Howard Taft, kind of a large man. There's a urban myth that he had to have, or he got stuck in the White House bathtub. That's not true. There's no evidence actually of it. It's just it's one of those things that probably was used against him in a campaign speech and stuff like that, but it's not true. Um, but yeah, a very interesting guy nonetheless. And then at the top here is President Taft, although a huge man of some 350 pounds, did get some exercise. He is shown playing golf on the 28th of June, 1909. Yeah, here's the thing. Taft is a large guy, but it's not like he didn't do anything. It's just the guy liked his food a little bit, okay? Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. He just liked his food a tad. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of actually presidents that like golf, funnily enough, and a lot of presidents that did do quite a bit of exercise, even if they weren't necessarily seen all the time doing it. But yeah, just very interesting. But that's gonna do it for this video. If you guys liked the video, leave a like. If you have any ways I can improve on these videos, leave a comment down below. I always appreciate your feedback. And as always, subscribe. It really does help out the channel. Thank you.